Hello, Shiver Seekers. Are you ready to follow us into the unknown? I'm Cynthia.
And I'm Stephanie. You found the dark oak.
And today I'm going to tell you one of my favorite stories of all time. I'm going to tell you all about 2018's Thai Cave Rescue.
Welcome to the Dark Oak, the mystery podcast with purpose. Each month through our charity, the Branch of Hope Foundation, we give a portion of earnings through our Patreon and sponsors to a nonprofit organization related to the first episode of the month. To find out more, head to our Instagram account, The Dark Oak Podcast, go to our website, thedarkoak.com, or stay to the end of the episode and we will give you all the details.
Thanks, Stephanie. I'm looking at you at a screen right now. Normally, Stephanie and I try to record in person, but I have some family obligations going on and I am on location.
It's weird. It is weird seeing you on a screen. I think we've spelled out for everyone pretty directly that we are not tech people. So the next few weeks, you being with your family is definitely going to be interesting. And we're also currently in the midst of our 100th episode celebration. So we are doing lots of extra recording, but it's also really fun. We're getting to try some new things. And again, celebrating getting to 100 episodes. And this is our first week. So this is technically, I guess, our first real bonus episode that we're putting out. So a Friday episode. Does it feel a little weird?
It feels a little weird and it's so exciting.
We are celebrating the release of our 100th episode at the end of this month. So that's April 2025. And to celebrate that, every week in April and May, all 9 weeks, we are going to bring you 2 episodes a week. So every Wednesday and Friday, this being the first Friday episode. So you're going to get 9 more bonus episodes. We're going to do our regular Wednesday episodes and then Friday. Cynthia's bringing our first inaugural bonus episode.
And to celebrate that 100th episode, we are doing a giveaway on April 25th. We will be going Facebook Live to announce the winners of our drawing. And if you would like to get entered into the giveaway drawing, all you have to do is go over to our Instagram, the Dark Oak Podcast, and follow us and leave a comment on any post, and then leave us a 5-star review wherever you like to listen to your podcast. Then just send us a little message. Let us know you did those things. We will enter you into the drawing and tell them what they will win, Stephanie.
A wonderful true crime candle, and the scent smells like chloroform, which is amazing. I am in the pod lab. Cynthia is again with her family, but I am burning a chloroform scented candle right now, and it is divine.
If it gets quiet over there, we'll know the chloroform got to her.
Exactly. And you're remote, so there's nothing really you could do.
True.
We also have some really cute, they were described as wristlets, but they honestly can be used as a makeup bag or a pencil bag or like a little ditty bag if you're on the run. And it has our logo and it says, "Shh, I'm listening to my favorite mystery podcast." And who doesn't need this little bag? It's really cute. I ordered extra for Cynthia and I because, natch.
Well, of course.
I think we're going to have as many as 5 winners here. Honestly, it's not so much about the winning. It's just we want to celebrate with you. We want you to feel like you're part of the community.
Thanks for sticking around for 100 episodes. We are so excited.
Woohoo!
For our inaugural bonus episode, I thought I'd do something a little different. And instead of telling you a super, super sad story today, as I said at the beginning of the episode, I am going to tell you one of my favorite stories of all time. Everything about this story strikes a chord with me. I love it. I love everything about it, and I really hope you do too. It was June 2018 in Mae Sai, Thailand. It was a Saturday morning when a group of boys ages 11 to 16 who were members of a local soccer team called the Wild Boar Soccer Team, along with their assistant coach, went to soccer practice, and then they were just going to hang out afterwards. And this was all part of their normal routine. But when dinner time rolled around, their parents collectively started getting concerned when none of them came home by the usual time.
This has notes of the Frog Boys.
As I was writing this, I felt a lot of similarities with the Frog Boys case.
This has a much more happy spin on it in the end, though, I think. Crossing my fingers.
It absolutely does. I will tell you that. It wasn't unusual for the boys to spend an afternoon playing together. And the boys thought, well, let's go to where the kids like to hang out. So the first place the families looked was the local playground. Only this wasn't the kind of playground you and I would take our kids to here in Florida. For these boys, the playground was the Nang Non Mountain Caves. Nang Non means Great Cave of the Sleeping Lady. And this is a prominent cave system located in Chiang Rai Province, Thailand. This cave system stretched about 6.5 miles under the Dong Nang Non mountain range. And this cave system was paradise for these kids, and they could often be found exploring here.
What is it made of? I mean, is it like a rock cave, or does it have crystals?
It's limestone.
Oh, okay. Beautiful.
Now, this mountain has a really interesting legend surrounding it. Thai locals believe that the goddess Nan Non, for whom the mountain is named, is a deity that takes care of this cave. Legend says that Nang Nong was a princess who fell in love with a stable boy, but her father, the king, forbade the relationship, so the lovers ran away together. And the king's soldiers hunted down the couple and killed the stable boy. When the princess discovered her lover's body, she killed herself with a hairpin. Her hair became the Mae Sai River, and the Nan Non Mountain is the princess's pregnant body. It's kind of shaped the way a body might look. It kind of resembles a body. And according to legend, the princess and her father never did forgive each other.
Wow. That is very intense.
A lot of history here with this mountain.
Yeah, very cool.
Now, when the boys' parents got to the cave entrance, their inclination was correct. Their sons' bicycles were lined up outside. So the boys had obviously gone into the cave. But there was a big problem. Every year, starting around July, Thailand starts getting heavy rains, and this cave system completely floods. So every year, beginning in July, the caves are closed, and then they stay closed for several months. But on this particular year, the rains came early, and while the boys and their coach were still inside exploring, a sudden downpour blocked the exit. Now, once the rains start, you can expect 4 months of monsoons. And within days, the entire cave system would be completely flooded. As I mentioned, Nang Non Mountain is made of limestone, and limestone is a porous material. So the mountain absorbs water from the ground when it's saturated. So the cave literally fills from every surface, and it gets really bad really fast.
That is really terrifying.
Terrible. And right away, the Thai Navy SEALs were called in. And at around 4:30 a.m. on day 2 of the kids being trapped, the first unit, led by Royal Thai Navy Captain Anand Surawan, entered the cave.
Do they know what's happening inside the cave? Like, do they think the kids are alive? Like, what do they think is happening?
There is reason to believe that the kids could be alive, but we really don't know.
Like, they just can't get out, but they're like trapped in it.
Correct. There's reason to believe at this point they could be alive, but no way of knowing for sure, of course. But it's 6.5 mile cave system with lots of twists and turns, and it goes up and it goes down. So at this point, there would be places where they could have probably been. That will not remain the case. The entire system will flood quickly.
And you said within days.
Within days, it could flood. Now, these Navy SEALs are the best of the best, but even for these highly skilled men, they are very much out of their element because cave diving is unlike any other type of diving. So cave diving is really what it sounds like. It's scuba diving, but it's scuba diving inside a submerged cave. You're in an enclosed space with no light, no heat, obviously no air. It's a very specialized type of diving and wouldn't be something that the Navy SEALs would have had any kind of experience with. This is a very, very specialized type of diving and not a very common type because the only people who are going to go cave diving are people who enjoy it. There really aren't too many other reasons to go cave diving other than you just enjoy it or enjoy exploring underwater caves.
If you just really enjoy being in super dark, claustrophobic places under the ocean.
Or any body of water, correct.
Or any
Yeah,
body of water. Now, isn't there also an issue with visibility because you're so close, like it's so enclosed, it's easy to stir up like silt and stuff like that?
absolutely. There can be. I'm telling this story really from the perspective of the divers. And one of the divers who worked on this rescue said that most of the time, cave diving is just jumping into a muddy hole. So it's not something that sounds attractive to a lot of people. You know, scuba diving over a shipwreck, though I would never do that. As we know, I don't like man made things in the water.
Oh, by the way, on that note, a listener wrote us and said that there are several TikToks of submerged man-made objects that I
Ugh.
should show you. I know you're going through a lot right now, so I'm not going to do it right away. But a few months from now, I'm just going to randomly say, "Hey, check this out," and then I'm going to see the look of fear. What is it called? Submechanophobia? Isn't that what it is?
Submechanophobia. Yes.
Yeah. So Cynthia has a phobia of swimming over man-made objects that are underwater,
Yes.
like plumbing, a house, like a man-made reef.
A
Oh,
statue.
a
Um,
statue.
and it's not just even swimming with it. I would not swim with it, but even looking at a photo of it, it gives me the creepy crawlies, really awful. But I can understand why someone would enjoy it. If you're swimming over a shipwreck or something like that, I understand that for people who are not like me, freaked out by it, there's something to look at. The cave diving, you're just jumping into a muddy hole. And as you mentioned, there's no visibility.
Even if you're scuba diving in the open water, it's like if something goes wrong, you go up.
Right.
You're in a cave. There's no going up or even out because depending on how far into the cave you are, if you're a mile into a cave, there's no going anywhere. Like
Right.
you've got to figure it out or you're going to perish in that cave. There aren't a
There's
lot of options there.
right. There's a lot of times one way in and one way out.
Right.
And you've got to monitor your air. And we'll talk more about this as we go along, some of the things that make this so dangerous. But, you know, you've got to make sure you have enough air to get out.
Yeah.
Like, because there's no
Oh,
going
yeah.
up.
That's right.
Because of all of these different reasons, it being out of their element, the low visibility, the first Navy SEALs unit was only able to travel about 200 meters into the cave before being forced to turn around because it was so unsafe. And during that 200 meters, they saw no trace of the boys at all.
Well, 200 meters is woefully short of 6 miles. So they're probably going to need to get back up.
Yes. So they did. They got some backup. Thai locals knew of a British man who lived in the area who was very familiar with this particular cave system. Vern Unsworth was well known in the area as the crazy caveman.
He was the crazy caveman before. Now he's the hero caveman. See how quickly that turns around?
He's absolutely one of the heroes. The reason why he was so familiar with this particular cave system is he had actually discovered many of the passages inside. So he was brought in as a consultant to help map out the caves and determine where the boys might be. So he knew kind of what happened, what route the caves took, where the different chambers were that perhaps could have sustained life for some time. So he was able to really help them know what was going on in the inside.
He's the man.
After the SEALs' first failed attempt inside the caves, Vern told the Minister of Sports and Tourism that expert cave divers needed to be brought in, and he handed him a handwritten note with two names, Rick Stanton and John Volanthen, the best cave divers in the world. Rick was a retired firefighter, and John was an IT consultant, and the two Englishmen had traveled the world together as cave diving buddies. And in the documentary, The Rescue, which I have to tell you, my favorite documentary of all time. And if you have not seen it, it's on Disney Plus. Go check it out. It is amazing. I've watched it probably 6, 7, 8 times, and I never get tired of it. I love this film, so please go look at it. But in that documentary, Connor Rowe, a fellow cave diver, said that Rick and John were idols in the cave diving world. Another diver, Dr. Richard Harris, with 35 years of cave diving experience at the time, described the first time he met famous Rick Stanton. He said Rick showed up to a dive with equipment that looked antiquated, and he had a homemade harness sticky taped on. Rick also had a homemade side mount rebreather, and that means nothing to me, but Dr. Harris said homemade. Homemade and side mount are two words you never want to hear in association with a rebreather. And it turns out Rick did make his own side mount rebreather from scratch because up until that point, they didn't exist. And after making this first of its kind kit, Rick jumped into the water and broke a new record.
Wow.
Now, Steph knows that my fantasy self is an avid outdoors woman doing all the things, not my real life self, but the fantasy me.
That is one version of Cynthia's fantasy life. Yes.
Yes, one of them. I have lots. But so because of this, I follow a lot of these athletes who actually do the things like, me. And something I hear them say over and over again is this sentiment that just because an activity is inherently dangerous, it doesn't mean you have to do it in a dangerous manner. So yes, cave diving in and of itself is dangerous. You're in an enclosed space, completely submerged in water, and if something goes wrong, really wrong, it will generally end in death. However, you take the correct equipment, you take backup equipment, you take double the oxygen you need, you take several flashlights because the caves are dark, you let someone know where you're going, you take a buddy, you do everything in your power to mitigate the risk of an inherently dangerous activity. I just love that because it really kind of puts things in perspective. As Stephanie knows, I'm a real scaredy cat. I really, truly am. And I love that this mindset, and I'm trying to adopt a little more of that idea in my own life, see if it might give me some more comfort doing some of these things that scare me.
Well, our ultimate goal is to actually hike the Appalachian Trail. So we're definitely going to have to plan ahead for that, Cynthia.
Right. Because even hiking the Appalachian Trail, which lots of people do, you can do that in a dangerous manner or you can do it in a safe manner.
Absolutely.
Now, Rick was dating a woman named Anne who just happened to be from this Providence in Thailand. This was her hometown. Talk about kismet.
Yeah. It sounds like he's a helper. We use that term a lot that we took from Mr. Rogers. I think we've even announced at one point this was going to be the year of the helpers. Like in every episode, we were going to try to find the helpers or highlight more episodes that have helpers. It sounds like he would have been a helper regardless, but in this situation, he almost had ties as well.
He did.
So that made him double down even more.
Right. And Anne called Rick immediately saying, hey, you've got to get to this cave. You've got to help these kids. So Rick and John flew to Thailand. Now, this was really comical to me because they were met by a group of officials wearing suits and very buttoned up. And here Rick and John are wearing shorts and t-shirts and flip-flops. And they were asked to pose in front of the welcome signs with all the officials. They're surrounded by press cameras and they are so out of their element. It is so not their vibe. So cave diving tends to attract a certain type of personality, and it's generally not a team sport player. It's generally not really your extrovert. It's more of an introverted type, be a little more quirky.
Yeah, I suppose those that are looking for maybe a little bit more solitude.
Exactly. For these poor guys to have to get all of this attention was really quite uncomfortable for them.
Oh, but they were there to help. And isn't that amazing that they're going to go out of their comfort zone in
Right,
order to be a helper?
right. Rick and John arrived at the cave on day 5, where by this time there was a very large rescue team in place. Now, keep in mind, the entire 5 days the boys have been missing, the cave has just become more and more flooded because the rain is still coming down. And at this point, no one knows if the boys are alive.
Yeah, because they haven't seen any sign of them. You're one of those parents. Aren't you basically just setting vigil at the cave, like the
They
mouth of the
were.
cave? Like you are not moving. I cannot leave this spot.
They were. There's a lot of footage of specifically the mothers, and it was tough. It was a tough watch. Tough watch. I cannot even consider putting myself in their shoes in my mind at all. It's just too much.
Yeah, I agree.
Once Rick and John got to the cave, the officials in charge would not let them go in because it's not just that the caves are flooded, they are flooded with violently running water. And it makes sense. The last thing anyone needs is more people getting trapped in this cave. So I totally get why the officials were hesitant to let them in. And the conversation ended up getting pretty heated with Vern and then Rick and John insisting they go inside the caves, but the Thai Navy SEALs are saying no way.
Well, and they're probably saying that because they weren't able to do it. And I can almost see in their minds being like, well, we're SEALs. If we couldn't do it, why do you think you can do it? I mean, do you think there was a little bit of that?
Absolutely. And John even acknowledged what it looked like. He said, here's these young, fit Navy SEALs who are being pummeled as they're trying to find these boys in this caves. And then two scruffy looking middle aged men show up wanting to interfere. So he was like, I get it. I really do. I get it.
I think with some of these currents and the cave diving, and it's more knowing how to tackle it with finesse.
Right.
You can't strong arm it. You have to know how to kind of flow with it. And you would know that if you were a cave diver.
I got the vibe that it was like, we're already looking for these boys. We've already potentially lost these kids. So the last thing we need to do is put more SEALs in danger, more people in danger to try to save you two when you guys get in there and get stuck. The argument did make it all the way to the top of the Thai Navy chain of command. And finally, they did give Rick and John permission to dive, but they told them, if you die in these caves, we will not retrieve your bodies. Well, by the next morning, Rick and John went to dive the caves. Now, as I alluded to, the cave system is made up of passageways that are twisty and turny and at different levels. You know, it goes up and it goes down. And then there are several areas where these tight passageways open up into larger chambers. And some of these larger chambers still had air pockets. So at this time, they were not completely flooded because that means, okay, potentially there are places where their boys could be.
Right. If they were able to find one of these chambers when it started filling.
Right. But a lot of the more narrow passageways were completely submerged at this point, requiring a full dive. And the first of these fully submerged areas was about 200 meters from the entrance of the cave. Now, because the rain's still coming down, it was considered white water caving, which is when you cave with a water current that's raging like a river. It had a really, really strong current.
I mean, this legitimately sounds perilous.
Oh, it is, Stephanie. This is even for cave divers. This is dangerous. And then on top of that, as you mentioned, the visibility was very poor. The water, they said, was the color of chocolate. On top of those natural hazards, there's man-made hazards, including telephone wire and electrical cables, all of these different hazards. And you can see, even for experienced divers, this is truly risky. Now, the golden rule of cave diving is you always have a line between you and safety. So Rick and John followed a line that had been laid out by the SEALs. This is literally their lifeline. After some time, Rick and John surfaced in what would become known as Chamber 3. This is the first large chamber that kind of opened up in the system. And to their great relief, when they arrived in Chamber 3, they weren't alone. They thought we must have found the boys. But no, it was 4 men, pump workers, who had missed the evacuation and got trapped in the cave, and no one even knew they were still in there. How scary is that?
Oh, how lucky did they get?
Oh, so lucky. Rick and John knew it was up to them to get these men out. So each man was given a regulator from one of the oxygen tanks still attached to Rick and John. And they were instructed to stay very close to their diver and then keep that regulator in their mouth. And then they were taken underwater. Now, this particular passageway that they had to navigate was so tight that at times the pump workers would hit their heads on the wall of the cave. And each one of these pump workers did the exact same thing. The second they believed they were under airspace, they rushed to the surface in a complete panic, literally almost physically fighting Rick and John the entire way out. And it was in these moments that Rick and John learned something very valuable. All 4 of these pump workers were only underwater for maybe 30, 40 seconds at a time. That was it. Very short period of time. And they were adults. And still, each one of them panicked. And panic is death in a cave. You get disoriented, you rip your mask off. You could, in this case, rip your diver's mask off. You could lose the line. Rick and John realized there was no way they were going to be able to lead 13 people out of this cave system, which meant even if the boys are still alive, there's no way to get them out safely.
Well, it must just feel so unnatural going under the water like that, like trusting this person that you don't know that their air is going to work, and then you can't see anything, so you're just bumping around in the dark, and you can get so disoriented, like which way is even up. I can see that just being really terrifying.
When I imagine someone saying, okay, put this in your mouth, follow me, and then taking me through a completely submerged tunnel of stone that's really tight. I mean, so tight we can't even go by side, like you're pushing me through. I think I'll just stay in the chamber. I mean, I really do. I think I'll just stay.
Right, because you said 30 to 45 seconds, but quite frankly, if you think about 30 to 45 seconds in pitch black and you're not sure where your next breath is coming from and you have to concentrate on this tiny little regulator that you don't even know if you trust, that is like the longest 30 to 45 seconds ever.
Oh yeah. Oh no, I couldn't do it. Now I'm incredibly claustrophobic, so honestly, I can't even get in an MRI machine. So this is like going through an MRI machine that's full of water.
Even in an MRI machine, you can still see everything. Imagine doing that in the dark.
Right? Yeah. This is a scary scenario to anyone, but this is horrific for someone who suffers from claustrophobia. And I think a lot of people do. I think a lot of people suffer from claustrophobia. That's a pretty common issue, right?
Yes, but I think this is the ultimate test of claustrophobia. Even if you weren't claustrophobic in general, I think you could certainly find yourself being that way, knowing that you're surrounded by stone in this water pipe.
Oh, it's awful. Yeah, no, it's
Yeah,
awful.
I think you made a really good point of these are adults. These are adults that should be able to calm themselves down, think rationally. So what are you going to explain to a child?
Right. And again, this was only the first chamber. The boys aren't here, which means they're much further in.
Right. So they're going to have to be submerged for even longer.
Right. Now, part of why I love this story so much is because this is really one of those scenarios where everyone came together. You had the Thai Navy SEALs, 2,000 soldiers from the Royal Army. There were civilians, doctors, all volunteering. There were very long lines of people lined up shoulder to shoulder, passing buckets of water down the line to the person beside them from on top of the mountain, just trying to take the pools, like where the water's pooling on the mountain, and
Oh,
scooping up the
wow.
water and then just passing it off the mountain.
It's basically trying to slow down the filling of the cave.
Right. But despite all of these efforts, even when the rain stopped for short periods of time, the water just kept seeping in because think about it, every little pool of water, every puddle on that mountain is being absorbed.
Right.
They were using sandbags and pipes, and they were even trying to line the surface of the mountain with plastic to keep the water
Oh,
from
man.
absorbing.
Wow.
Now, by day 8, it was pretty much accepted that the children were at this point probably no longer alive.
Yeah.
The documentary shows footage of the boys' mothers screaming in agony into the caves, telling their children that they're waiting outside to take them home. But at best, it was believed that instead of a rescue mission, this was going to be a recovery. But Stephanie, the overwhelming response from everyone around them was, these boys are athletes. They're strong. You can live without food for 8 days, and we know they have access to water. These boys could still be alive. The water kept rising as rescuers continued to lay line as far as they could inside the cave. But the deeper they got inside the cave system, the more hopeless I'm sure it seemed, because there was still no sign of the boys. A very highly respected monk named Kruba Bunchum came to visit the cave site. Some of the people of Northern Thailand believe Kruba Bunchum is the reincarnation of the king. Remember the king from the legend?
Oh, that killed the stable boy?
Yes. During his visit, Kruba Bunchum announced that the children were still alive and that they would come out in a few days. However, he warned that the mission would not be without tragedy. 2 lives might be sacrificed. And the day he arrived to the mountain, the rain stopped.
Okay, that's quite the prophecy.
Though the rain stopped temporarily when monk Kruba Bunchum visited the site, it did pick back up again and was kind of on and off at different levels throughout the entirety of this ordeal. Rick and John decided to go back into the caves, and they laid line all day Sunday. And then the next day, they took 2 more bags of rope to continue. Now, from the entrance of the cave, it's about 800 meters or half a mile to Chamber 3, where there was still some dry land and where Navy SEALs are now permanently stationed. From there, it's another 800 meters to the T-junction, which is an area where 2 underground rivers unite. And then beyond the T-junction was mainly just flooded cave, except for just a few areas, one of which is Pattaya Beach, which is about 2,000 meters in, or about 2.5 miles into the cave system. And this is the area where it's believed the boys could have been, because it's the highest area in the cave system. So seemingly, the boys would have had the best chances of survival there.
So basically, if they're going to find them alive, that's where they're going to be.
They're going to find them at Pattaya Beach.
Okay, that must have given them at least some hope.
After a few hours, Rick and John made it to the T-junction, and the entire time they're going through this cave system in dark, murky conditions. At this point, they're going by feel. They're feeling which way the passages are going. And they're not just feeling around to find their way. They're also knowing they could run into something unpleasant. They could run into the bodies of these boys, and they had to mentally prepare themselves for that possibility.
But the other hand is holding on to the rope, right?
You got it. You got it. One hand is on the line.
And the other one is feeling around for the wall, or, like you said, something that they really don't want to find.
Right. Right.
Well, I am glad I was not called during this expedition, because you got to be a real special person to be up for this kind of task, right?
Now, anytime the men got to airspace, they would take their masks off and smell the air, because I guess the smell inside a cave is completely neutral. So if there's any people in a cave for this amount of time, dead or alive, there's going to be a very apparent smell after 10 days. There would either be the smell of defecation and other bodily odors, or decomposition. On this particular day, when the man ran out of the thick line that they were bringing in, they decided to keep going using a smaller reel of thinner line. They decided, let's just go as far as possible into the cave this day. And this was by far the furthest anyone had made it into the caves. But unfortunately, when Rick and John arrived at Pattaya Beach, again, the only place anyone thought the boys could have realistically been, it was completely underwater.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
Oh, that must have just devastated everyone.
Oh, you know it. You know it because this is their last hope. Now, Rick and John were so surprised and so discouraged to not find the boys that they actually retraced the route a few times just to make sure they were, in fact, at Pattaya Beach. And they were just devastated. This was their last hope.
So this is twice now that they've had to face the realization that the children really are not alive.
Right? So at this point, John was ready to turn around. He'd already used far more air than was sensible. When cave diving, the rule is to use a third of your air on the way in, a third of the way out, and you keep a third for spare. So he was already past those limits, but something inside of him said, keep going. This is the time to push. So the men continued upstream, and this time when they hit airspace again, they were met with an instantaneous pungent smell and complete silence. And the combination seemed to mean one thing. They had found the boys, but the boys had not survived.
Yeah, and tell me what day was this?
This was day 10 of the boys being in the cave.
10. Day 10. So we're talking day 10, no food. I mean water, but is it really drinkable? I mean, so this is pretty dire.
As they were coming to terms with the realization that this was not going to be a happy ending, a light flashed in the cave. And what happens next is actually caught on camera because Rick and John took video of this. You see the entire wild boar soccer team and their coach looking down at Rick and John from a slope they'd climbed up. And they were looking at these men just saying, thank you, thank you, thank you to these two men who at that point must have just seemed like angels.
Honestly, I'm not sure who would be more relieved because you have these cave divers who have just been doing everything, literally everything in their power, even sacrificing their own safety to try to find these kids. And they finally did. I mean, the jubilation that must be there. And then you have this band of children who, quite frankly, didn't even know if rescue was even underway. Like, was rescue even possible? So I imagine I mean, of course, they're kids, so they're always full of hope. But their coach, I imagine he, as an adult, was thinking the chance of rescue is probably pretty slim. So when he sees divers come up, it must have just blown his mind.
I think everybody was a little mind blown at this point because even in the video, you can hear John saying, believe, believe, believe. And he would later say that was him literally telling himself, believe this. This is actually happening.
Incredible. That's
Right?
incredible. Yeah.
It is incredible. These boys were so incredible. They had been in total darkness, except for whenever they decided to turn on a flashlight, but total darkness otherwise for 10 days, no food, no natural light. They had no idea what day it was, what time it was. They were starving, they were weak, but they were alive. And I love this. This is awesome. Before leaving, Rick and John took a close up video of each boy's face so that their
Oh,
maybe making me tear up, but so that their parents could look at their boys that night. As a mother, I'm just like, thank you. Thank you for having the wherewithal to think of that.
yeah. Yeah. How special that was.
Right. Now, finding the boy spot brought a great sense of relief, but also dread, because when Rick and John geared back up, they silently looked at each other, knowing they may be the only ones that ever see these boys alive again.
Yeah. How on earth are they going to get them out of this cave?
Right. Shortly after Rick and John exited the cave system, their footage of the boys was released all over the world, and the world collectively rejoiced. And I remember this in real time. Do you remember this?
I do. I do. I remember coverage of it. It was kind of daily coverage of their exploration of the caves, but I do remember hope of ever finding them was slowly dwindling in the
Mhm.
news reports, and then no one could believe that they found them.
Right. That night, there was a meeting with the Thai Navy, and Rick and John broke the news that finding the boys was the easy part. They had no idea how to get them out.
And based on where they were in their cave, there's no other way to get them out than through those tunnels, right? There's no like going into the mountain or excavating. I mean, I guess that would just take too long, right?
Well, they're going to look at different options. The Thai Navy SEALs decided they were going to take over the mission, and Rick and John would remain on in advisory roles. On day 12, Captain Anand sent in a total of 7 Navy SEAL divers with power gels, energy bars, foil blankets, and then 2 of these SEALs who were medics were going to stay with the boys until they were rescued. Rick would later say that in the event they couldn't get these boys out safely, the SEALs were going to die in the cave as well, because there was no way they were going to abandon the boys. And I 100% believe that to be true. Of the 7 divers that went in, 5 were supposed to come out that day, but after 10 hours, no SEALs returned. They'd made it to the boys, but because cave diving, again, is so out of their element, they used up way too much air on the way in, and they didn't have enough air to make it out. So only 3 of the 7 divers were able to make it out that day.
And they were worried about Rick and John being the problem.
Right. So how are they going to successfully perform this rescue? The question was raised, maybe the boys could stay in the cave until the end of monsoon season, which ended in October. It's June, October. But no, that was not an option. The oxygen level in the boys' chamber was already dwindling, and now we have even more humans in the space because now we have the SEALs in there with them. And the chamber is still very much at risk of flooding. So there's no way we can stay in there for the next 4 months. Like you mentioned, rescuers wondered if maybe they could drill a new entrance into the cave, but this wasn't a foolproof plan by any means. And I don't know why they abandoned that idea, but it obviously just didn't seem like the safe choice.
Yeah, depending on how far down it was, could have been pretty perilous to try to dig into it and not drop things on the boys. And also, it seems like it would have just taken a really long time to get equipment to even be able to do that. They've got to get out in days here.
Right. Pumping out the water was futile because after 1.6 million liters of water was removed, the water level went down 1 centimeter.
Wow. Yeah, that's
Isn't,
not going to work.
isn't that wild? So attention turned back to Rick and John. At this point, it seemed the only option was to dive the boys out. So Rick reached out to his friend and fellow diver and medical doctor, Dr. Richard Harris. And Dr. Harris is the man who said when he first met Rick, he was appalled at the homemade equipment.
Yeah.
And the two start exchanging messages. And Rick had a very unusual question for Dr. Harris. Would it be possible to sedate the children and then have a diver bring them out? But Dr. Harris said, absolutely not. This was an absurd idea. There's 100 ways these children would die while being sedated underwater. No, this is not an option.
Well, and sedating children too, that's a whole level of unpredictability, right?
Yes, yeah, even if you're not underwater, but specifically when underwater, a person needs to be in control of their airway when they're diving, because if their head moves into the wrong position, it can obstruct their airway. Their sinuses could fill with blood. They could drown in their own saliva. But Rick just said, please, just at least think about it. And with no other options, Dr. Harris said, I'll give it some thought. That's all I'm going to do. I'm just going to think about it.
Because what is the other option? You put these kids underwater, they panic, and then they drown in their panic. Or worse yet, they drown, and then also the diver trying to help them gets injured as well. It's bad. All the options are bad. Actually, now that I'm thinking about it, they're all hard options.
Right. The Thai Navy SEALs decided, okay, the best course of action is going to be to teach the boys to dive. A retired Thai Navy SEAL named Saman Gunan had volunteered to help with the rescue. And when he left his home, his wife told him she was worried about him participating in this dangerous mission. But he assured her he would be all right. He wasn't alone. He was with his SEALs. And there's this amazing photo taken of the moments Rick and John made it back to Chamber 3. and announced that they'd found the boys alive. And in this photo, you see Saman smiling ear to ear with both thumbs up. So Saman and his dive buddy brought in bags of wetsuits for each of the boys. And this made an already difficult dive to the boys' chamber much harder because the wetsuits were very buoyant. So not only did these seals had to fight the current, which was already difficult enough, this time they had to do it while carrying these really buoyant packs. And unfortunately, this caused Saman to run out of air on his way out of the cave. And he was fairly close to chamber 3 when he ran out of air, so his dive buddy was able to drag him the rest of the way. But when he finally arrived at chamber 3, he was unresponsive. He gave his life to save these kids. Now, his wife spoke of him in the rescue documentary and said, "Generosity is the beginning of everything. Without generosity, you cannot be a volunteer." And she said she was proud to be the hero's wife.
Well, she should absolutely feel like that.
Rick and John acknowledged how brave Saman and the entire Thai Navy diving team was, because this wasn't something they were equipped for or trained for. And every single one of them who went into that cave was undeniably brave. And in Saman's honor, the Thai Navy continued with their mission, deciding not to let his sacrifice be in vain. However, the Rear Admiral made the decision that the Thai Navy SEALs would not be diving to the boys anymore. It was just too dangerous, and they couldn't put the Thai SEALs beyond Chamber 3.
And really, I understand that because they haven't been trained for this.
Right, they haven't been.
It doesn't have anything to do with bravery or strength. They simply just don't have the knowledge to be able to do it safely.
The truth is, no special force on Earth has the appropriate skills for this mission. Really, the only ones who can do it are this private group of people who cave dive as a hobby.
This misfit group of introverts.
Right.
Really.
Rick said he knew from the moment he and John found the boys that though the responsibility of rescuing them was not officially on their shoulders, it was morally on their shoulders. He said he knew it had to be them. So back Rick went to Dr. Harris, and this time he told him they had no choice. The boys would have to be sedated. Dr. Harris agreed he'd come to the site and he would provide any necessary medical attention, but he was not going to sedate these kids. Now, in preparation for the proposed rescue that nobody's willing to do at this point, Rick was asked if he could put together the best team in the world. In addition to himself, John, and Dr. Harris, Rick suggested Chris Jewell, Jason Mallinson, Josh Brachley, Jim Warney, and Connor Rowe. On day 14, Dr. Harris arrived to the scene in a sea of press, and he decided that in order for him to even consider the sedation, he would need to dive to the kids himself and see for his own eyes that there really was no other way to get them out. And at this point, the boys were weak, thin. Some had developed a deep, wet cough, but each of them remained very strong of spirit. Their coach had been leading the boys in meditation, and it had helped them stay calm and conserve energy and oxygen. And after seeing himself just how dire the situation was, on his way out of the cave, Dr. Harris decided he had no choice but to sedate the boys and dive them out.
And this is probably why you are covering this case. It's just an impossible decision all the way around. First of all, these kids should probably not have survived that long. The mission was almost given up several times. And now they have this plan to rescue them that, quite frankly, is very flawed, but it's the best they have.
I will tell you, Stephanie, nothing about this should work. Nothing about any of this should work.
Nothing is safe. And I can see why Dr. Harris is saying this is not what we should be doing. This is not safe. It's not approved. It's never been done. But again, there's no other option.
True. And the conditions kept worsening. More rain was expected, making diving more dangerous. Because think about it. The more rain that comes, not only does the water level go up, the water gets rougher.
And murkier. Yeah.
All of it. Even if the chamber didn't flood, the oxygen in the boys' chamber was dwindling.
And also, how dangerous would that have been? The longer they're there, you're having to have these divers go back and forth in the cave for miles just to bring them food and drinkable water, which is putting their lives at risk, the
Right.
divers' lives at risk. So none of this is without risk.
The truth is, Stephanie, the photographs of the smiling boys and the foil blankets told the public one thing, but the reality was the cave stunk. It was filled with human waste. There was no food, very poor air supply. It was not sustainable for life for a long period of time already, that even just the oxygen supply.
Not to mention anxiety, fear, just trying to hold it together.
Oh,
I just imagine it was just really horrendous.
the boys had cuts, they had wounds, they were at risk of infection. Many of them were showing signs of infection and illness. It was a bad situation inside that cave. And Rick and John explained to the Thai authority their proposed rescue plan, but they were honest and said, this is extremely risky. But if we're able to even bring one child back to their parents alive, it's going to be better than the alternative. On day 15, the team still didn't have an official go-ahead, but they came up with the logistics of the mission. So they came up with the plan for how the boys would be sedated. They decided the air cylinder was going to go on the front of the boys instead of the back. They had to figure out what kind of mask to use. They decided on positive pressure masks. So if there was a leak, the leak would go out and not inwards.
Yeah, and also, I mean, they're kids, they have small faces. So I imagine they had to find special masks to fit their little heads.
I didn't get the impression the masks were specialty size, but I guess they are kind of specialty masks because the American troops happened to have four of these masks with them on site.
Okay.
The rescue, they decided, would take 3 days. They were going to take 4 the first day, 4 the second day, 5 on the last day. The team simulated the rescue as best they could on land, so they measured out the space. They called it a rock drill because here they are on land, just measuring everything
Oh
out,
my gosh.
acting
Wild.
acting out what they're going to do so they could get a feel for what they'd physically be doing in the cave. But John said in the documentary, the drill was useful for the divers, but it was actually more useful for the people making the decisions because it let them see the plan and realize, okay, there's a method. These people do have some idea of what they're doing.
Again, you've planned the best that you can.
Right. Now, I thought this was so interesting. Foreign Affairs warned Dr. Harris that if something went wrong during the rescue, it would not be impossible that they could end up in the Thai judicial system, meaning they could be imprisoned if something went wrong and these kids died. So, on top of a rescue plan for the boys, there was a second rescue plan for the divers to put them in a van and drive them to the embassy compound using only country back roads in the event this didn't work out well.
Oh, there's that.
I mean, we're doing what we can here to try to save these boys who are going to die if we do nothing, but we could be imprisoned if it goes wrong.
I think there would have been a pretty big outcry from, the entire world
Right.
if that were to happen, I imagine.
That evening, Dr. Harris spoke to his wife. It just happened to be their 28th wedding anniversary, but it wasn't a happy conversation. He told his wife that he assumed the next day he would be bringing out deceased children that probably drowned while he was diving them out of the cave. To give him the courage to try, he said he thought of his father, a vascular surgeon, and that gave him courage to go forward because the one thing he inherited from his father was the knowledge of how to treat people. His father was very generous, and so he wanted to treat other people the way his dad always did. On day 16, no broadcasts were to be done. Dr. Harris taught the other divers how to administer the anesthetic drugs that were in pre-filled syringes because on top of everything else, Stephanie, these anesthetic drugs were going to wear off in the middle of the dive. So these divers were going to have to inject the boys with more as they went along because otherwise they would wake up in the middle of the dive.
Wild.
None of this went smoothly, to be honest. In the documentary, Dr. Harris said that he told the divers to jab the boys on the outside of their thigh through the wetsuit, and he had them practice on empty water bottles. And he told them, hey, listen, nothing can go wrong. It doesn't matter if you hit bone. It doesn't matter what you do. This is impossible to mess up. And he was lying through his teeth, but he was just trying to give them the courage to do this because lots of things could have gone wrong, but nothing he could help them with. So he just told them, hey, there's nothing that can go wrong. And I just was like, he's a very wise man.
Yeah, but what is the other choice?
Right.
What is the other choice?
10 divers went into the caves along with 6 Americans, 5 Australians, 5 Chinese, 6 specialist civilians, and every one of these people had their spots along the route where they were stationed. A section of Chamber 3 was cornered off, and 15 body bags were brought into Chamber 3 in case things didn't go well. So Chamber 3, that's where,
Oh, gosh, that's horrible.
yes. Chamber
I feel like
3,
that's a bad I feel like that's a bad omen.
I think it is, but they have to be prepared. And from chamber 3, they're able to lift the boys up and get them out the rest of the way. There's no more diving required at that point. That was kind of like the last assessment place. So if they were going to have to take out a body, that would have been the place they did that. Because what else are they going to do? Are they going to bring somebody out not in a body bag? That's not going to go well.
I know, but maybe they should have only brought down like 10. Like, we're at least assuming 5 are going to make it. I don't know. I mean, is that wrong of me? Like, we'll bring 1 just in case, but I'm sure we won't need it. I mean, 15? Man, that's rough.
It's rough. It's rough. In went the divers all the way to Chamber 9. The first boy was put in diving gear. There was no time to be wasted. We're 2 weeks into this. Like, there's been a lot of preparation and planning, but now here we are in that moment. And every single one of them was so scared, so nervous.
How did they pick which kids went first?
Oh, the boys picked. They'd already decided amongst themselves that the kids who lived the furthest away would get out of the cave first so they could give the news of their rescue to the other boys' parents on their way home.
Oh my gosh, now I'm going to cry again.
Isn't that precious? These boys are amazing.
Now, remind me their ages again.
11 through 16. And the coach, he's in his early 20s. So they're all young.
And that's incredible that he was able to keep all those kids calm and together and collected. He's a hero too.
Oh, he's a hero for sure. Because that he's the one that they looked up to, and he's young himself. He had to be terrified. He had to feel so much pressure on his own. How scary would that be if first of all, you're the leader who brought these kids here. This terrible thing happens, and now you feel a responsibility for these boys, and you're terrified yourself. He did a great job. The first boy was given Xanax for his nerves, and then an injection of atropine went into one leg, and that contained an anti-saliva side effect, so hopefully the boys wouldn't drown in their own saliva. And then ketamine went into the other leg, and that was the general anesthetic drug. And during all of this, keep in mind there's a language barrier between Dr. Harris and the divers and these boys, but they stayed so calm. They were so brave. The plan was once the boys were unconscious, their masks would go on. And even doing that proved difficult. They said it was like putting a mask on a rag doll.
Right, right. What's incredible is I doubt the boys even actually understood how dangerous this was.
I'm sure they did not. Right?
Everybody's just like, no, it's going to be great. You're going to take a little nap, and then you're going to be with your parents. It's going to be great.
You would have to.
Yeah. Yeah.
So Dr. Harris said he was really, really bothered by the fact that he had to push these boys' faces underwater while they were unconscious, and their hands were tied behind their back and their feet were tied together.
I mean, it makes sense, but also, oh my gosh. Oh, that's such a grim visual image.
He said he felt like he was euthanizing the kids. He just said it felt so wrong to tie these boys' hands behind their back, tie their feet together, and then push them underwater while they're unconscious.
They are literally at your mercy, and you hope you don't screw up.
That would feel so wrong. That would feel wrong. And the reason for tying them was so they wouldn't panic.
Well, and then also you don't want their hands and feet flailing around where they could accidentally get hung up on the wall or stuck on
Right.
a cord or something like that too. Yeah.
After the first boy was geared up and ready to go, his assigned diver, Jason, told Dr. Harris he's already not breathing very much. And all Dr. Harris could say was, this is a one-way trip. Once you start, you cannot stop. You cannot come back to me. There is nothing I can do. And if you end up taking a body out of the cave, then that's what you're taking out of this cave. And it's true. There's nothing they could do. So start off the trip right, get everything as right as you can. But once you start, you have to go all the way. That would be so, oh, I don't even know the word. That would be heavy. That would be heavy.
Yeah. Yeah. So much responsibility and pressure. Oh my gosh. I would need a Xanax.
Me too. When Jason surfaced in the first chamber with air that he came to, so chamber 8, where Rick was waiting, the two cautiously checked to see if the boy was still breathing. And he was. He had survived the first 300 meters, which was amazing, but there were still 1,500 meters to go. John was the diver who took the second boy, Chris took the third boy, and Rick took a fourth. Now, throughout his journey, John kept noticing that his boy wasn't breathing correctly whenever he had the mask on. But then when they took the mask off, his breathing would improve. But then he'd put the mask back on, he would stop breathing again. After a few minutes of this, John said he just wanted to get out of there. He was just ready to bolt. He said it took everything he had not to just get out of that cave, which I totally get. But
Absolutely.
he knew he had to figure out the mask situation or the boy was going to drown.
Right.
So he kept messing with it until eventually it appeared the problem was remedied and he continued on. But that was a long dive worrying about this.
Well, because you don't know when you're in that tunnel, you can't really see what's happening.
Right. And it wouldn't matter even if you could. It wouldn't matter because even if you see
Right.
the boy's not breathing, you're underwater in a tunnel. And
Right.
what are you going to do? There was one section right before chamber 3, so towards the end, that was especially narrow. This was the area where those pump workers had to go through. And this area was so narrow, the child had to go in front of or behind the diver. It was just too tight for them to go side by side. So the diver would push the child through first, and then they would start to hear the pumps from chamber 3. So they knew they were getting close. And when Jason surfaced with the first boy, an entire team of people grabbed the boy, put him on a stretcher, and like a conveyor line, they lifted him out of chamber 3. Everybody just stood stationary and just lifted this boy out. And miraculously, he was alive. He made it out alive.
Jason must have just fallen flat on the ground
Right.
after that.
I would just cry. I would just cry.
Yeah. And then say, oh, great, I get to do it again tomorrow.
Right.
But the fact is, you saved that boy. You saved that boy. And really, you saved his whole family.
Right.
Because everything is wrapped up in this child.
And
wow.
This was the first one. So
it gave hope for all the rest.
hope
Yeah.
For all the rest. It took 200 people standing shoulder to shoulder in 2 lines to lift the boys out of chamber 3, and then carry them to the cave exit. And this is exactly what they did when John surfaced with boy number 2, who was alive.
Incredible.
And then Chris surfaced with boy number 3, alive. And shortly after, Rick showed up with boy number 4, who was alive. After 16 days, the first 4 boys had been rescued, and it was a miracle. A miracle.
16 days of not seeing sunlight.
Right? Right.
Wow.
This was a great success, obviously, but there were still 8 boys and their soccer coach still trapped in those caves.
And a few seals as well.
That's right. The plan was the next day, they're going to take 4 more boys out, and then the final day, 5 more out. And according to plan, the next day, day 17, 4 more boys were successfully rescued alive. But that evening, the rain picked up.
Uh-oh.
As close as they were to having rescued the entire soccer team, there was still a major risk that Chamber 9 could flood before they could get them out. On day 18, the water was rushing, and the dams that diverted the water from the caves were not going to hold very long at all. There was a question as to whether it was even safe for the divers to go into the cave because it was perilous. The water was so rough. But literally, as the officials are talking about, I don't know, maybe we shouldn't let them, the divers just stood up and walked into the cave. They just went. And I love that.
You're like, forget it. I'm going.
Yep.
Just get out of the way. We're not stopping. And we're going to accomplish this mission. Like, we're going to complete it.
The coach was taken out first, and he survived the journey. And he was followed by the successful rescue of 2 more boys. Now, Chris had the 4th boy to come out that day, and he made it all the way to the hardest section, that really tight squeeze right before Chamber 3. But on this particular day, probably due to the really rough waters, all of the divers had problems in this area. And the way they were forced to go through the space, remember, with the boy in front of them, this is not what you would naturally do as a diver. It made holding the line above them really difficult. As Chris was maneuvering one of the corners, he had to transfer the line from one hand to the other hand. But when he let go of it, it snapped away from his hand and he could not find the line.
Oh, terrifying.
So he is desperately grabbing and grasping for this rope. And remember, panic while diving is death.
And the other hand is holding on to the kid.
Right. And instead of finding the line, he kept grabbing onto electrical cable. He kept finding this electrical cable. So after a few minutes, he assumed, okay, the cable probably goes back to Chamber 3. So he followed it thinking it's going to take him to Chamber 3 where he needs to be. And after about 10 minutes, he surfaced in a chamber, but it was completely empty. Now, Chamber 3, remember, is filled with rescuers. So this is really bad. Chris knew if he somehow ended up in a completely unknown chamber, nobody would ever find them. Now, at this point, back at Chamber 9, we have the very last boy. They already thought that they had taken the smallest boy out, but then when this little boy came walking down, they realized he was the smallest by far. He weighed less than 64 pounds. And he had this really tiny face. But the problem was they did not have a mask to fit him. So in the beginning, you said they must have needed special masks for the kids. I don't think they did. I think they were able to use regular size masks. But this mask would not fit this kid.
It's true. A regular mask would have fit a 16-year-old, but a very petite, small 11-year-old, different story, I imagine.
You can't dive without a mask. We have to have a mask. So they did everything they could to get the mask to fit the boy, but it just wasn't going to fit. But for some unknown reason, the divers had brought with them a small pink, almost like a toy mask. Now, they had no intention of using this mask. This mask was nowhere near suitable for what they were about to do, but it was significantly smaller. And even with the smaller mask, the first 2 times they tried it, the seal collapsed and the mask completely filled with water. And the divers knew that the smallest knock was going to rip this mask right off. So Dr. Harris felt so terrible for Jason, the diver who was taking this boy out, because he realized, okay, this is going to be the boy to drown. And poor Jason, he's going to have to live with that. But again, what choice did they have at this point?
Right.
So Jason took the boy and on he went. And when he got to the last air chamber before Chamber 3, he surfaced and he saw Chris leaning over his child. Chris, remember, who lost his line?
Yes.
So when Jason got to this chamber and saw Chris leaning over the boy, he just assumed, oh no, his boy died. When Chris saw Jason, that's when he realized he'd followed the electrical cable backwards in the cave. He'd gone backwards and he was back in Chamber 4. So
Oh my gosh. Well, thank goodness he wasn't completely off the charts.
right. It was total relief. But as you can imagine, Chris was really shaken. So when Dr. Harris surfaced just a minute or two later, he told Chris, okay, you stay here, you collect yourself. I'm going to take the last boy out. And this was actually really beautiful because, Dr. Harris had done all of the sedating. He'd done a lot of the planning for this, but he had not carried a child out. So this gave him the opportunity to carry a child out, which
Wow.
had the
Yeah.
potential to feel really rewarding if it went well.
Yeah, of course.
Now, by the time Jason made it to chamber 3, he was terrified that this mask on his child hadn't held, but the boy was alive.
Phenomenal and incredible.
Finally, Dr. Harris came, and he had the last member of the Wild Boar soccer team with him, alive. All 12 boys and their coach survived the impossible. There are no words for the joy that erupted in Chamber 3. The rescuers passed around a prohibited bottle of Jack Daniels that they were not allowed to have in there. But they were
Warranted.
celebrating. They were totally celebrating. Now, they weren't completely in the clear yet because the Thai Navy SEALs who'd stayed with the boys still had to get out of there. And, we know there was a risk there. But overall, the
Yeah.
feeling was relief and celebration. One of the main pumps in Chamber 3 burst, and water was going everywhere. Chamber 3 is filling with water. The rescuers,
No.
right? The rescuers who've been in Chamber 3, they didn't have regulators with them. And the water's coming in fast. They had to immediately evacuate. As the chamber flooded, the last 2 Navy SEALs made it out of the cave. Fortunately, all of the rescuers made it out, but some of them were literally holding their breath underwater as the cave filled.
Nick of time. Imagine if they had listened to officials and not gone in. I mean, the amount of guilt I think they would have carried, whether it was appropriate or not. I mean, which it would not have been. They did everything they could. The kind of men you described them to be, I don't know that they would have been able to forgive themselves had
Right,
they not gone back in.
right. The locals took this as a sign that their princess said, "You got what you wanted. Now it's time to go." Now, what I love so much about this story, I love everything. I love the fact that it's air quote misfits that are the heroes. I love the fact that the boys were so brave. I love the fact that none of this should have worked. I love everything about this story. But what I really, really love is the whole world came together. I mean, hundreds of people were in that cave. Thousands of people were on site working from other locations to rescue these boys, different ethnicities, cultures, religions, languages, life experiences, and none of that mattered. Nothing was going to stop these humans from coming together and succeeding in what really felt impossible.
There was one life lost.
There was one life lost in the cave.
That is absolutely incredible. And again, Saman absolutely died a hero, but it is incredible that only one life was lost in this entire scenario, which again was impossible.
It was. It was impossible. Now, Saman was the only one to lose his life in the cave. When Dr. Harris got out of the cave, he texted his wife, "I'm out. I'll call you when I get back to the hotel." And when he called her, he just babbled from joy and relief, high on adrenaline. He said he probably babbled for 10 minutes before he finally took a breath. And then he heard his wife burst into tears. And that's when she told him his father, the doctor, the man who'd given him the courage to even attempt this rescue, had just died just a couple of hours earlier.
Oh, wow.
And in the middle of all of this beauty and this celebration, he thought about going straight home. But then he decided that wasn't going to help him. His dad had lived a fantastic life, and he died peacefully with no suffering. And he said he couldn't have asked for a better exit for his father. And Dr. Harris decided it was another cause for celebration. So not only was he going to celebrate this rescue, but he was going to celebrate his dad. All 13 rescued from the cave made quick recoveries. And this group of misfits, these people who did this strange thing, who do this strange thing, cave diving, and who don't quite fit in with the rest of the world, they were all hailed as the heroes that they absolutely are. Rick and John were given medals of honor by Queen Elizabeth and Prince William. Many of the divers who had been the last to be chosen for a team sport or other generally socially desirable activity were among the first to be chosen for such an important rescue. And through this experience, they found more purpose and more confidence in themselves. Nearly 5,000 Thais participated in this rescue. Hundreds of volunteers from around the world also contributed. And just a few days after the rescue, the cave became completely submerged, fully submerged, and only weeks later, the neighboring town flooded. The cave remained inaccessible for the next 8 months.
Wow, even longer than they had predicted.
And that is the story of the Thai cave rescue. And it's so unbelievable to me. None of this should have worked. None of it should have worked. And it did. And I just love it. And if you have not seen that documentary, The Rescue, you've got to check it out. It's so good. I mean, you'll be holding your breath the whole time, even now that you know how it ends. You'll be holding your breath, but wow.
Yeah. Yeah. Imagine being that little boy in the little pink mask now, like looking back at it now, hearing your story, like hearing what these men did to save you and how they used a mask on you that should never have worked. I mean, wild, right?
It's wild. When the boys came back, of course, they got some fame and stuff like that. But truthfully, they were just sweet kids. They were just good kids. They were good kids before. They were good kids after. It's incredible to me that these children were able to be so strong. Oh, it's such a good story. It's just what a good story.
Yeah, let's ride that wave. Let's talk about some Branch of Hope.
Okay.
So we're in April 2025, and we introduced our nonprofit for the month in the case of Mary Day, which is a must listen. But our nonprofit this month is Futures Without Violence. And Futures Without Violence has been operating for almost 40 years, and they work to build thriving families and communities which are free from violence and filled with hope and opportunity. Now, to do that, they have several different initiatives. One is to work on reducing domestic and sexual violence. Another is to provide additional economic opportunities. They also teach a lot of gun violence prevention. For instance, they recognized that gun violence is now the leading cause of death in the United States for children and teens. Did you know that, Cynthia?
No, and that is terrifying. That's
Ahead of car accidents. Yeah, ahead of car accidents and cancer.
Wow.
The Gun Violence Archive verified a shocking 271 U.S. mass shootings in 2024. Multiple studies find the majority of them involve some connection to domestic violence or are committed by shooter who has a history of domestic violence. So, by working to keep these firearms out of the hands of those who have already shown a propensity for violence, we could cut down on the amount of children and teens being killed through gun violence. So again, just one of their initiatives. I love this one. They have a mentoring group for men and boys. And I think that's a group that's kind of been missed over the decades, teaching different coping skills and ways to communicate without using violence. I just think that's just such a wonderful development for our society. And I love that Futures Without Violence is really focusing on this and moving that initiative forward. So if you are our Patreon, know that a portion of your subscription is going to Futures Without Violence in the month of April. You are supporting us as creators and then also doing good for your community. If you want more information about Futures Without Violence, you can head to our Instagram account, The Dark Oak Podcast. You can head to our website, thedarkoak.com, or you can message us if you need any additional contacts. We would love to get you in touch with Futures, especially if you are someone who is in a home with domestic violence. We would love to get you hooked up with some victim advocacy centers and also Futures. If you have survived a domestic violence situation, maybe you would like to be a volunteer at Futures. Maybe you would like to be able to connect with other youth that are going through what you went through. Maybe you could be an inspiration for them. And we can all take the steps forward to creating a less violent world.
I love it. What an amazing organization. Check out next week's Wednesday episode, where I tell you all about the Lake Oconee murders. It's probably the most gruesome episode I've brought to date. So be prepared.
Is this why you brought us an uplifting episode this week so you could just bring us way down next week?
Maybe.
All right, folks. Thank you so much again for joining us on this 100th episode celebration bonus episode. We will see you next week.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
This episode of The Dark Oak was created, researched, written, recorded, hosted, edited, published, and marketed by Cynthia and Stephanie of Just Us Gals Productions, and made possible by you, our shiver-seeking listener. Special thanks goes to Justice Himes for our incredible artwork and Ryan Crete for our amazing music.